here to remind you that you're not alone. Here, we talk honestly about real challenges, meaningful growth, a space for connection, encouragement, and resilience. You belong here. Resilience from Within, brought to you by ADMS. We are here to remind you that you're not alone. Here, we talk honestly about real challenges, meaningful growth, a space for connection, encouragement, and resilience. You belong here. Resilience from Within, brought to you by ADMS. We are here to remind you that you're not alone. Here, we talk honestly about real challenges, meaningful growth, a space for connection, encouragement, and resilience. You belong here.
Welcome to Resilience from Within. Tonight we are finding strength in a community. ADMS Pathways welcomes you to our fourth podcast tonight. We have a wonderful guest for you, one of my dear friends, Nadine Wright-Arbubakrr. Welcome to our podcast. Tonight we are celebrating Mental Health Awareness Month, and it's also Mother's Day this May. So I can't think of another special woman in my life than you to welcome to the podcast. So Nadine, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Jill. I'm so honored to be here, especially with you.
It really is an honor. I know we met about 3 or 4 years ago with our work that we are so passionate about. We share so much in common. And as I've gotten to know you and your dear family, I consider you kind of like a family because we share a passion and purpose for helping, providing, supporting families, and sharing resources with our families of the autism community. So
thank you for your heart in sharing, and I think of you as family too. So yeah.
So I'm excited. I know we could talk for several hours tonight, but I want to welcome you. This is a podcast where we share a safe place for families to get resources, learn from stories, learn from others, and really gain information that will help them in their next steps. I know that in your journey, you have had to discover a lot of it on your own. So I'm hoping today that the families hear from you and your journey from motherhood to advocacy to sharing resources to really strengthening communities, that they take away their next step. So today I'm going to ask you to share your story. How did autism come into your life when you were working as a corporate woman? How did you then become involved in autism?
Wow. First, again, I want to thank you and all of you for having me here today. Anytime that I get an opportunity to talk about my story and my journey, I just hope that it can resonate with another family out there or another mom who may want to do the same thing that I did and hear my story and know that they too can do this. It's a lot, but you can do it if you put your heart and keep your faith in it. So first and foremost, I have to give honor to God, because without him, nothing is possible. With him, the impossible is possible. And that's why I think I was chosen by him to live in my purpose. Autism became a part of my life in 2006 when my son, Nadine, was diagnosed with autism. I had no idea what autism was, hadn't clue. Honestly, I may have heard it, but didn't understand it. Mm-hmm. And I remember the day that I knew something was different with Nadine. I remember him not responding to his name. I said, Nadine, and usually he responds, but that particular day was no response. And I remember thinking, okay, well, maybe there's something wrong with his hearing.
Right.
I'll never forget that day the Elmo commercial came on because he loved Elmo. Elmo was like, eh. And he ran to the television. I was like, well, wow, he heard that. So I called him again and he didn't. So what I decided to do was turn on the DVR and tape it and see what happens. So I laid him on the bed, called out his name, nothing. As soon as that commercial came up, he jumped up. So I said, maybe it's not his hearing. But then I noticed some other characteristics that I had not seen before. He started flapping. He started running back and forth. He got very repetitious. Then he started going into these things I call today involuntary meltdowns. Most people will call them tantrums. You know, when children sometimes want things and they can't get it, they go into this big tantrum type thing. But what I learned that Nadine was dealing with something called autism.
Mm-hmm.
After I did some research and we were able to finally get him into a developmental pediatrician. And I remember going to my pediatrician and I said, Doc, something's different. Something's not right. Nadine's not talking. You know, something's off. Well, prior to Nadine, I have 3 daughters. So he's like, well, boys develop differently than girls.
Right.
And my gut kept telling me something's
Mm-hmm.
not right. There's something just not connecting here. And I'll never forget putting him in a daycare center because previously he was being watched at home by a babysitter. And I remember the very first day, the woman came over to me very hesitantly. And she said, well, you know, we noticed that Nadine stayed to himself. He kept putting things in his hand, in his mouth. And she said, well, maybe did you think? And I was like, you see it too? Because I'm excited at this point. Like,
Right.
I'm not crazy. There's something going on. And she kind of looked at me a little startled. And I said, well, what? She said, no. She said, normally when we approach parents, some of them get very defensive.
Yes.
Because they don't want to ever think that there's anything wrong with their child.
Mm-hmm.
But as a mother, I saw something was
Right.
different. So I didn't want to ignore it. I welcomed that opportunity. And we started the ball rolling with early intervention. Early intervention came into play. We went into a developmental pediatrician. We initially got the diagnosis of PDD, NOS.
Right.
And if people don't know that, it's called persuasive developmental delay, not otherwise specified. Back then, we're talking almost 18 years ago, it was the thought process that children were still developing up to the age
Right.
of 5, right?
They gave them that opportunity.
To still grow.
Yes.
You know, unfortunately, things didn't really progress as much with Nadine as we would have liked.
Mhm.
Early intervention did make a huge difference. And so did, you know, getting other therapeutic services for him like ABA. But the one thing I can tell you for me, I needed to understand this better. I needed someone to help me, guide me through what do I do next after I
Right.
get this diagnosis? Where is the support? Like, I was overwhelmed. Like, I thought about, this is my only child. And as I started Googling, Google became my best friend. But then I
Mhm.
started seeing some of the things about autism and, you know, is my child ever going to talk? Is he ever going to be able to do, you know, live a normal life? You know, all those things flooded through me. And, you know, as time progressed, you know, things did get better, but I had to live in my reality. Each one of our children are different, you know, but one of the things that bothered me a lot after I would get off the phones and call different agencies to try to get help and support, it was very overwhelming, you know, to watch your child or the child you thought you were going to have, right?
Right.
Not be that child. Because all of my dreams of being a basketball mom, a football mom, kind of in that moment, it was dashed, right? And, you know, I questioned my faith, right? I questioned, you know, my God, like, why my only son? Why my last child? And, you know, in my head, I'm a Christian. And in my head, you know, God came back to me and said, I gave my only begotten for you. And in that moment, I knew that I was chosen. God gives special children to special people.
Mhm.
I didn't understand the path that I was about to be on, but God knew what path that I was going to be on. And one of the things I kept coming back to is, why can't I find programs and services and supports within my own community? What did that look like?
Mhm.
And for 6 years, I pondered that thought. And every time I said, no, I'm not going to do this. And do this means start a nonprofit and now become a solution to a problem that was plaguing, you know, communities of Black and brown children. Because I born and raised in the great city of Newark, New Jersey, currently live in another great city, East Orange, New Jersey. And I couldn't understand why, when I finally did get off the phone from one agency after being flip-flopped from this agency to that agency to this agency to
Right.
find a program, it was in Sparta for
Mm.
respite.
Right.
Which means I would have to drive an hour, drop them off, and then come back an hour. It made no sense. So, you know, after pondering that and dealing with all the therapies, you know, it was a lot. It was overwhelming. And that's how autism entered my life. But it literally did change my life, right?
Yes.
It didn't change it for the worse, right? It did change it. I'm not going to tell you that the diagnosis doesn't change your life, but it doesn't mean you stop living. It just means you live differently. And I had to figure out what that was. So I had to leave my corporate job. I was in banking for almost 20 years.
Right.
And It's interesting because the only job that I could think of to get to do was to become a teacher, an educator, right? And I thought about it. I said, well, if I become a teacher, I can learn more about this thing called autism by working with special needs children. And then I can also be home with my son more, because I was working 16-hour work days at that point. So teaching was going to be it for me. One problem. When I decided to leave high school, I decided not to go to college. Big mistake, because I needed a degree to become a teacher. So at the ripe old age of 40, I decided to go and get my bachelor's degree, and I was able to get a bachelor's degree in business management and marketing. And I got to tell you, my years in corporate America and management actually prepared me for my next journey of life, and that was to start a nonprofit inspired by my own son called Nason's Place.
So what really thrills me about you, as I was reading and, going through information about your journey, is that you admittedly say, I knew nothing about autism. I had heard it, but I really didn't know. So I started Googling, and you've shared that in many interviews before. So you've gone from Googling on an entrance level of what is autism to actually now sharing, advocating, and running a thriving business to help other people find resources. And that is just such a personal growth. And to what you also said about our children kind of change our lives. And isn't that true? And the mothers that we are sharing stories of resilience with, often we just say, like, our children do shift us, and we have to kind of move, modify, and adjust, with that journey. I love the idea that you started not knowing, and now you're empowering others. I know here at ADMS, we try to empower families by meeting them and sharing things that can help them through barriers and providing resources. And we really help people transition into next steps. And again, Nadine, that's who you are, wherever you are, whether it's a party that you're doing, a celebration with your people, your intimate family stories, you're always sharing your next steps. So here you are, raising a child with autism, figuring out that you have this managerial success about you, and you had a mission and you had a vision. Can you share what that was?
Wow. Yeah, it wasn't my vision. It was my mission. It was God's choice for me. And, I never wanted another parent to feel the way that I felt after I got the diagnosis. To be able to get on the phone and call agency after agency for them to point you this way, to point you that way. I used to cry every time I got off the call. Like, why am I keep being ping-ponged all over the place? And, that got me thinking, stop complaining about it. Do something about it. Be a part of a solution. You know what the problem is. Why aren't there resources and services right here within Essex County? Why can't these families get the same types of supports as any other children? A zip code is something that I believe in should never be a reason any child goes without much needed services and resources within their own community. So I decided not only to create these resources, but not be the person that would also tell them to call this person to get that one. I wanted to be able to provide the services as well. But when you're starting out as a grassroots organization and a nonprofit world, and you have no clue, it doesn't come as easy as everyone thinks. But one thing I can tell you is that I was tested a lot along the way, but my faith kept me strong. And I knew that these families deserved to have resources. We needed support groups, right? Because what do you do when you get the diagnosis? There was no blueprint. So I wanted to be able to talk to other parents. I wanted to be able to let them know, number one, that they're not alone, because I felt like I was alone. I felt like I was the only one dealing with an autism diagnosis. Unfortunately, I found out that I was not. There was countless other families dealing with this thing called autism. And I learned through the way that autism is a spectrum. Like, it's not a one size fit all for our kids. Everyone gets this idea in their head sometimes when they see Rain Man or The Good Doctor.
Yes.
But it's not always like that. But what I wanted to do was to make sure our children had access to programs such as after school programs, summer camps. I wanted our kids to be out in the community. So often, and there's a stigma, especially in Black and brown communities, that no one was talking about it. They kept the children hidden like they were some dirty little secret. Our children weren't dirty little secrets.
No.
They should be in their communities. But what I learned, Jill, along this journey is that I had to educate a community along the way.
Yes.
And how do you do that? How do you educate people for not understanding what your child is going through? Well, you go out into the community, you create a pamphlet, you tell people what autism is, why an organization like Nason's is needed in the community, and then you watch God water it and it prospers to where you need to be, where, through our advocacy of helping families, we were able to build a village of moms and dads whose children never got a chance to go out to birthday parties because they weren't invited for whatever reason, play dates. Nason's Place has changed the game in Essex County and beyond by making sure that these families and these children know that they have a place within their own community. And I got to tell you that there's no way I could have done this by myself. So I applaud the community for standing with me, all of our sponsors, our donors, volunteers, support staff. But one of the things that I learned, and I really had to understand better, if we're living in the city of Newark or the city of East Orange or any municipality, why aren't you providing programs for children with different abilities?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I went knocking on doors and I went to the municipalities and I said, can we have, the very first thing I did, one of the very first things is having support groups. We were sitting in the city of East Orange many years ago. And, a lot of people don't know, one of the number one causes of death for our children is by drowning, right?
Right.
For some reasons, children on the autism spectrum are drawn by water. But a lot of children, especially in urban inner cities, families can't afford swimming programs.
Right.
So I went and, I remember being in a meeting and the director came out at that time, Osmond Charles, and he said, well, how can we help? And one parent said, we want swim lessons. And he said, okay. And then it started and it snowballed, and the city of East Orange was the first municipality in the state of New Jersey that I know about that offered autism safety swim programs for children with autism. And that year, they actually got an award from the state for doing that. And then Newark followed behind. But then I went one step further. Why can't our children have a full day summer camp like other children, right? If you're able to give atypical children in the community a full day, why can't our children have one too? And what I've learned and what people really don't understand sometimes is that our children do require more. They do require more support.
Yes.
So it does cost more to service our kids.
Yes.
But does that mean they don't get it? And, again, knocking on doors. The city of East Orange was the first municipality that I know about through their recreation department that started a autism summer camp. And I know because I ran it for them.
Right.
And, Newark followed behind in doing the autism swim safety program. And then Newark did something different than East Orange. I worked for East Orange doing the summer camp. Newark partnered with me to do the summer camp. So it was a win-win for the municipality and a win-win for our families and a win-win for the nonprofits. It's so important that we collaborate.
Right.
Why reinvent the wheel? So I am so proud to say that this will be our 5th year partnering with the City of Newark Recreation Department to provide a full-day summer camp for children on the autism spectrum. And I think it's important for our children who have different abilities to get the same types of services and resources. And I just want to say, it hasn't been an easy journey trying to get all the things that we have gotten for these families by knocking on doors. But I got to tell you, the people that I've spoken to along this way, they have readily opened the doors. So much so, the city of Newark, Mayor Wright-Arbubakrr, the great mayor there, saw the impact of the work that we were doing in the community. And he gifted us land so that we could build a home of our own. Because the one thing Nason's Place doesn't have is a home of our own. We've been so fortunate to have some amazing community partners that donate space to us so that we can provide the programs and services. But again, there's nothing like having your own. So we're in the process now of working with a developer to build a state-of-the-art autism center in the largest city in the state of New Jersey, Newark, that will service all of our children, no matter what their zip codes are. You do not have to be a Newark resident to be serviced by Nason's Place. And we even went one step further because there's so many other facets and layers that happen when you're raising a child with autism. Homelessness is one of them.
Right.
Right. It's different for us as it would be for a typical family who may not have a child with special needs to be homeless. So we're building 44 units of apartments that will be affordable, that will have a percentage going to families and children with autism. And I think that that is so important. But this journey has led me to meet some amazing people. Our children get to go to a movie day once a month, a sensory-friendly movie day. I remember seeing somewhere one of the AMCs in the suburban community was doing a movie day, a sensory-friendly movie day. It's like, why don't we have that here?
Right.
So I reached out to the movie theater in Newark, New Jersey, Cityplex 12. I'll never forget Frank Gonzalez. He was new to the theater at that time. We've been there 13 years, so we're celebrating 13 years. And I remember he was asking me, well, what is autism?
Right.
And that was a teachable moment, right?
Yes.
Educating the community. And I told him what it was, children, neurological disorder that affects their cognitive, learning, social. And he said, okay, sure, come on in.
Right.
And
we've
now
been
it's
there 13 years later. I mean,
Mm.
honestly, you have really built a community within a community. And what I love is you make the impossible possible, but just by asking. And they say if you put it out there, it'll come, right? Your ideas and your needs, and by talking to other families, you've seen what could make an impact, what could make a difference. Here at ADMS, we support families in the same way. We try to provide resources that are bridge the gap between school and home for families. We try to support them in finding work and transitional services. And we need more people, just empowering people like in the belief that it can happen and tapping into what the needs are in community. You've had a great way of surrounding yourself around people. I've had the joy in working with some of your resilient mothers myself and listening to their stories so deeply. I've seen it grown through the years that you and I have partnered together. And more recently, I attended something and was so touched by the idea of different mothers from different age groups being present. And that speaks to how long you've been doing this work. So I want to ask you this question. What would you really want families who are just starting out to know about asking for help?
First thing I want to say, I want to talk about that event that you came to. That was our first actually it was our second mental wellness and self-care weekend for autism moms and caregivers. I think it's so important for people to understand that it is very overwhelming at times for us. Me included. I am not exempt from being mentally overwhelmed a lot of the times. Nadine is profoundly on the autism spectrum. Basically, he has the mental cognitive probably ability of a 2 to 3 years old. He is epileptic. Last year, we had about 64 seizures that I'm dealing with. He has behaviors that can be very, very aggressive and very overwhelming. So, the brain sometimes goes zoo when you're dealing with some of our babies. Again, it's not a one size fit all. Each family and each child is different. From my personal experience, I'm going through a lot mentally. So that weekend was not only for those moms, it was also for me. It was an opportunity for us to connect. It was an opportunity for us to de-stress and to learn. We laughed, we cried, we had fun, we got pampered, and it was an amazing experience. And I think that it's something that we'll definitely be bringing it back again. Thank you for being there.
Yes.
But I do know that it is very important for us as caregivers to take care of us first, because if we don't take care of us, we can't take care of them, right? And I tell parents, you can still live with an autism diagnosis. It's just that it's not a one size fit all. So you have to find what works best for you. I tell parents all the time when you talk about, resources and services. But one of the things I can tell you, I get a lot of calls from grandparents because they see something in their grandchild that their daughter-in-law or son may not see, or son-in-law and daughter.
Right.
And, I see something, and I tell them this, until they're ready to accept what they see in front of them, it's nothing you can do. What I will say to those parents, if you see the signs, it doesn't mean that your child has autism. And even if they do have a diagnosis of autism, wouldn't you want to know so that you can start to get the services and resources that they need? Because if you start out early, right, you can help enhance their chances of developing a lot more quicker with it. So please don't ignore the signs. I will tell you that, especially again in Black and brown communities, the stigma is there. But the numbers continue to rise. New Jersey has one of the highest rates of autism in our country today.
Yes, they
And
do.
I just tell families who see the signs, reach out. Nason's Place is here. There's so many great organizations within the state of New Jersey that can help, right? Autism New Jersey is another resource out there that has a plethora of information. But if you're in Essex County or surrounding areas, please reach out to Nason's Place. If we can't help you with what you're looking for, we will definitely point you into the right direction. So for those parents who see the signs, don't ignore it. It doesn't hurt to get your child evaluated so that you can get he or she the proper resources that they need early on so they can develop into the wonderful child that they were meant to be into the adulthood.
That's great. It's great information to know. And I know that ADMS has also a special place in your heart, and they've been able to support you along that journey. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about the services and the support that you receive?
Yes. Well, first and foremost, I've been supporting ADS for a few years now. I think that it's important for people to know that there are services out there. And I am also a client of ADS personally for my own son. To be able to have an organization out there that supports our 21 and over population, is so important because a lot of families don't know that there are resources past 21 or past 18.
Right.
So to have, ADS be out here in the community helping families like us. I was just talking about the fact that we have so many children who are now adults that came out of our school systems throughout the state of New Jersey and probably predominantly more in urban inner cities that don't know that they can get services for their special needs adults now through ADS and other agencies out there that are helping these families. One of my goals is to try to find those families and to let them know that there are resources out there that are available to them for the 21 and over population. And, my focus when I first started Nason's Place was on the smaller kids because Nason was small. Now he's that 21-year-old. He'll be 22 this year. So now my focus is on DDD services for the 21 and agencies like ADS makes a difference. And one of the things that Nason's Place is committed to is working with all of our agencies to make sure that we give families the information that they need so they can make the best informed decisions for their young adults right now. And people need to know that for the 21 and up population, that DDD services are available and agencies like ADS exist. And then for the 21 and below, you need to know that there's Perform Care out there, which is a state agency that will provide services for you, such as an after-school program, a Saturday program, or respite services, and even paying for camp for up to 2 weeks with one-to-one support. And a lot of parents don't know this, and I'm sharing this out there, is if you have a child that's in an elopement risk, like my son is, he's gotten out of that house several times and he's gotten off our property. So I needed something to securely keep him in. We had a fence that was old and decaying. And I found out that Perform Care through the state agency would pay for a fence to keep my son safe. And guess what? I have a fence built by the state and they pay for it because one of the things that they will do is to make sure that your child is safe. So there are a lot of programs and services out there for our 3 or 2-year-olds up to 21. And then we have DDD, which now has agencies like ADS helping these families navigate getting services and resources that will help them through their adulthood and live productive lives.
I know one of the things that you do with Nason's Place is you create sensory events. What made you start to think of the idea of creating that kind of atmosphere for the kids?
A couple of things did. One is our children need to be seen, right? They shouldn't be hidden. How do we do that? Because all of our kids are different. We talked about, autism, not a one size fit all. So I thought about doing sensory friendly movie days. We talked about that. But doing other activities, I made sure that, we reached out to Chuck E. Cheese years ago. We would go in on a Sunday morning before anyone got in there because some of our children don't like a lot of people around. They don't like a lot of noise. And these types of places were able to cater to of the siblings as well because they're impacted, right? And then they get to connect with their peers. They get to make new friends, like, because it is overwhelming
It
for the whole
is.
family.
And, you know,
unit.
I've met your family. And speaking of siblings, you know, I love your daughters. So I do want you to talk a little bit about when you were raising the son. How did you communicate his needs with them, and what was that like?
Wow. That was a tough one. My two older children were kind of almost out the house. My oldest, Dominique, was already pretty much out the house because there's a big age gap between her and Nadine, almost 13 years. Naya, I remember Naya, which is my second born. I remember her coming to me one day, and she decided that maybe it would be great if she goes to boarding school. So she did this whole presentation about boarding school. And, you know, at first I was like, nah, I don't think so. But then, you know, after she presented herself very well, which she does,
Right.
I said, that'd be great. And then she finally got into a boarding school. And I remember, you know, Nason's development had changed. You know, his behaviors were a little more aggressive. And she saw it being a little overwhelming on me. And I remember her coming to me and saying, Mom, I don't have to go away. I can stay and help you. And I said to her, thank you, but no thank you. Nason is my son. This is my journey, not yours. And one of the things I did not want to happen is I didn't want Nason to be my daughter's responsibility. Hassana, which is my third daughter and my youngest daughter, she was 2 years in age difference with Nason. And I remember when it was time for her to go to high school, I made it my priority to make sure she was not home as well. So she wound up going to the same boarding school that Naya went to, through a program called A Better Chance. They went to school in Darien, Connecticut. And one of the reasons I decided that that was important was because I wanted them to live their lives. And I did not want their brother to be their responsibility because he was mine. And that's not always a one-size-fits-all for each family, because a lot of the families that we serve are single-parent households, right? They don't have the additional supports. But one of the things that I did, right, I found out how to build my village. My village included school. It included after-school programs. It included ABA services. Whatever I could get for my son to help me, to help him, I did. But it was also an opportunity to make sure my daughters had their own childhood, their own teenage years, without having the responsibility of raising their brothers.
And a lot of families really struggle with that.
Yeah, it's
you know,
hard.
When you have multiple children, you know, accommodating to everybody's needs is not an easy task.
No.
I myself juggled 2 kids with a working husband who wasn't home all the time at night. And, you know, I was picking up from one soccer game, driving to a lacrosse game, going back to the soccer field to make the last 15 minutes. Thank goodness I made it while there was a goal. And, you know, and seeing those little moments. And not every family really can do that. And the resources like you've talked about. And I'm so happy to hear that you said my village. And you started with school, after school programs, because schools do play a really big part. And I know that that you really have tapped into all of those kinds of resources to build your village. I mean, what an influencer you've been to the other mothers and fathers and also grandparents who I've met in the son's place. And seeing and hearing is believing. Like you said, bringing the children and bringing not only the children, but their families, their siblings into the community and sharing these experiences.
I think it's important. One of the things I will say is I tell parents all the time, you know, a lot of parents have this idea, if we send our kids to school, they're supposed to fix our kids. That's not their responsibility. They're supposed to educate our kids and give them the best possible education so that they can meet their full potential. We as parents, caregivers, we have an obligation, and that village has to be built. That village has to be, you know, you working with your school district and your school district working with you. And don't get me wrong, sometimes you do have challenges within some school districts to try to get what you think you want for your child. And this is one of the things I share with parents all the time. What you want for your child and what your child needs may not always be the same thing. You know, we all want our children to be atypical, you know, but what is atypical, right? At the end of the day, we have to do what's in the best interest of our children. But I do know that a lot of our parents don't know how to advocate for themselves.
Right.
And one of the things that Nason's Place do, we will go in to help advocate for that parent. You know, I hear a lot of time, why am I fighting with my school district? Why fight? And I don't like to use that word fight. I think it's important that school districts work together and in hand with the families and vice versa. But we have to come together because we're part of the
You
same
have to be
village.
partners.
We have to be. And I think that is so important. And, I tell parents all the time, you have an obligation outside of school to make sure you continue some of those services, whether it's ABA, whether it's OT, speech, socializing. You have your part to do as well. And that's why I said you got to build that village. And part of that village is your school. And I will say this, a lot of times I get families that come and they say they can't depend on their family members.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times family members don't want to deal with some of the challenges that may
Mm-hmm.
come with some of our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have those who are very supportive. And outside of that, I'll tell anyone this, and I stand by this, until you actually live the lives of an autism parent, you really don't get the true magnitude of what we deal with when
Mm-hmm.
those doors are closed and, everyone else don't see it. I respect anyone who goes into the field to work with our children. I think it's so important for us to have these amazing educators, therapists, but I got to give my hats off to the people in those rooms that don't get the recognition that they should. The teachers' assistants and those paras. I think that they're the mostly grossly underpaid individuals out there, but those are the ones that are in there with our children, dealing with some of those challenges, knowing our babies, and to all of them, if you can hear me today, I thank you. I appreciate you. I know you guys don't hear it enough, but it takes a special heart.
It does.
to
It's
work with our
Teacher
children.
Appreciation Week.
Yeah,
so you
so-
can give a big shout out to all those teachers
Yes.
out there.
Listen, I thank you
who are
all
in
for
the
what you do.
trenches every day.
And it's not easy. And I think it's important. One of the things that's on my to-do list is to have a candid conversation, because I think teachers really understand what parents are going through at home.
Mhm.
And then the parents really don't understand what the teachers are going through in the schools. So wouldn't it be really amazing if we just had a candid conversation so that we can better understand
Well, we could
each
make
other?
that happen.
I think
You and
that's
I could make
important.
that happen. And
Yeah.
and that is a really, really great point. As a special educator myself, I mean, I would be in IEP meetings sharing, little snippets of what a glimpse looks like in the classroom during a read aloud, during a one-on-one session, during teaching a writing assignment, and share these stories with the parents, and even doing parent workshops, kind of modeling and showing them what the expectation is, and sharing videos of what their child's doing, and to the parents' amazement, what's really possible. And those possibilities shouldn't be shared just at IEP meetings, because if we share them more often and let parents see what's going on in the classroom, what's going on during the therapy session, they can make and replicate that at home. And then those make bigger wins for kids.
Most definitely.
I mean, I know that when I listen to your story and how Nassan communicates in a very different way, right? He doesn't talk. And what I find really interesting is that Nassan leads through his actions, right? That's how he communicates. And you lead other parents with your actions. That's how you communicate. And that struggle that you have had when he was younger, being nonverbal, must have been another piece of that journey that was troubling. Can you take us back to how that started and how you got him to begin communicating?
Wow. I remember Nassan being 16 months before he stopped responding. I remember calling out his name, telling him to sit down or lay down, and he did it. And then one day it kind of went. I remember him saying, "Mama, Dad." I've never heard my son's real voice, right?
Right.
But through, and I talked about this earlier, ABA therapy was a game changer for me. It truly made a difference for my son. I remember, thinking that he would never do certain things. And I remember one of my sheroes. I have so many amazing sheroes along this journey called autism. I call all of my autism mom sheroes. But one that stuck out to me during the time that I was dealing with this was Holly Robinson Pete. I'll never forget watching her share her story and talking about the never day for her son RJ, and how she made it okay for Black and brown communities to talk about it more. She was one of my inspirations as well. She used her platform on a national level to get out more awareness to autism. And I so gratefully appreciate her for that. I personally didn't want to be on a national level. I wanted to be in my community, helping those families in those urban inner cities. But she inspired me so much because she talked about the never day, that RJ would never be able to talk. The doctors told her he'll never probably have a job. He'll never, never, never.
Yes.
RJ drives a car. He works. Matter of fact, he got three World Series rings. He works for the LA Dodgers. He's living his best life. And, listening to her back then helped me to deal with the things I thought was never going to happen.
Yes.
Right. I remember the day Nasan finally didn't have to wear a diaper anymore. He was 9 years old.
Right.
I never thought that was going to happen. I remember the day that the ABA therapist, Miss Loretta, was working with him. And she told him to point to the number 1, point to the number 2. And he did it. I was so amazed. Even though he didn't verbally communicate, he understood. And he still understands. Nasan is 6'6" today. He's almost 30 pounds. He's a big kid. But Nasan understands a lot. He also can be a little overwhelming at times. But to have my son now go to the bathroom on his own, he hasn't mastered the wiping. Unfortunately, he can't take a bath by himself. Certain things he will need 24/7 care, right? He will never be able to be left alone because he does have seizures. But to see him now being able to go to the bathroom and to sign, because he does sign.
Yes.
It took a village. And I'll never forget this woman named Loretta. She was the ABA therapist. She was the third one that we had. And I remember that first week she came to us. Nasan was a hitter. He was a biter. His behaviors were very challenging back then. And I remember that first week she came, Nasan bit her. He bit her so bad on her arm that she did have to go to the hospital and get a tetanus shot. And I said in that moment, that woman's never going to come back.
She's never coming back.
I apologize because as an autism parent, we never want our children to hurt anyone, right? But I had to stop making apologies for something that I really couldn't control, but to hopefully have people understand. And I still apologize, but not so profusely, like I'm so sorry. But Loretta stayed with us for 8 years. 8 years. And I got to tell you, she helped my son so much. And getting ABA services. It's just so important for parents to know that it's not a one-size-fits-all when you're looking for an ABA therapy or even a company. We have several that we work with that are our partners. And I tell parents, I hear a lot of times parents say, oh, I got an ABA therapist. They didn't work out. This one couldn't come when I wanted. Don't give up, because if you give up because of that one bad situation, you're giving up on what your child could potentially have. Because I call Loretta an angel, right? An earthly angel, because my son was a lot to work with. And a lot of our children can be challenging, not all, but quite a few. And you need a special heart.
Yes.
And that was in the form of Loretta. But getting the proper therapies and services, and again, building that village makes so much of a difference. So
I love your village.
Yeah, let me tell you something. I'm blessed beyond measures to have 3 amazing daughters.
Yes.
You talked about them earlier.
They're lovely.
I will tell you, Naya, starting with Dominique. Dominique just came back from Georgia. She moved back to help. She didn't realize a lot of what I was dealing with, but she's there. Naya lives out in LA. Hassana lives in Maryland. But they're Naya, let me start with Hassana. Hassana is her brother's keeper. I do know that she got her brother hands down, just like with all of my girls. Naya surprised me a few years ago. I'll never forget when she said, Mom, I got something to tell you. And I remember, I was like, what? At that time, Naya was working for Netflix out in California, and she was working on an animated series called Ada Twist, the Scientist. I said, okay, I was happy for her. Because, by the way, Naya used to work at my favorite soap, General Hospital. That's another conversation. But she was working at this on this show that was based on a series of books about an African-American girl by the name of Ada and her adventures with her friends Rosie and Iggy. And it was co-produced by Chris Nee, who created Doc McStuffin, and Higher Ground Production Company, which is owned by Michelle, my forever president, Barack Obama, and Michelle Obama. And she had an opportunity to write 4 episodes for that particular animated series.
Right.
And the very first episode she chose to write about was the introduction of Ada's cousin. by the name of Nadine,
Right.
who was on the autism spectrum.
Well, people say children write from their experiences. I'm a literacy coach myself, and that is truly where you have taught your daughter, obviously, that we all have gifts. We have to give them, and we, by sharing our experiences, help others. So through her writing and production, she was doing that. So the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, Miss Nadine.
That was a good one.
That was a good one.
Yeah, because she showed representation that wasn't being there. You don't often see an African-American nonverbal autistic child depicted on television.
Right.
And she did that. And I thought it was so amazing because that episode beautifully educated even a preschooler on what autism was. So I will forever be grateful to her and to Netflix for taking the time and care to make sure they mastered that character.
And look how far we've gone now with Netflix. I mean, and like you said, the only way to truly educate people about any kind of developmental disability is to expose them and show them the truth. There are books, there are articles, there were some movies many years ago. But by doing your events, by bringing your children to different experiences, by raising, young girls who are going to write and create things. I mean, this world is really moving into more an inclusionary, vision. Before we go, we have some questions from our ADMS followers.
Right.
We have an Instagram page, which I hope you're following, and Facebook, which I hope you're following. We've got some questions, and I kind of sort through the questions throughout the month and pick what's appropriate.
All right.
So we'll quickly go through these before we resolve our podcast for today. Nadine, where do you reach for inspiration?
First and foremost, God, and then second and foremost, my mom. My mom is the reason I am the woman I am today.
Yes.
Trying not to get emotional because I lost my mom last year.
I'm so sorry, yes.
But she was my biggest hero. She taught me how to give. She taught me how to love. I get it from my mom.
Yes. And I was sharing with you today that my mom was a special educator too. And I used to kind of hide behind the wall while she was tutoring some special needs children. And when I would listen in, I kind of felt like that was something I could do. Our mothers do really plant seeds in us. And it's how we let those seeds grow. And you're still really, developing that way. Another question that I came in, which is really interesting, is how has social media supported you as a mother of a son who is in like a transitional period time?
Wow. It has supported us a lot. I mean, social media is what is needed in this time, right? We didn't have this back in 40 years ago, 30 years ago, but it is definitely a lot of information out there that you can now share. I will share, through Nason's Place, right? The organization, nonprofit, we struggle just like any grassroots organization struggle. And I remember we got a email from the Philanthropic Foundation, which is a foundation, a huge foundation that gives money to different nonprofit organizations. Unfortunately, we've never gotten anything from that particular foundation. And someone reached out that said someone wanted to hear more about our story. And we went on a Zoom call with the interested party. They didn't tell us who it was. I got to tell you, that grant saved us. And a lot of people don't know it, but last year, we were going through some financial challenges, just like any other grassroots organization. A lot of people think grassroots organizations get all this funding, and we don't. We were struggling, and out of nowhere, God sent an angel, and it came in the form of a woman by the name of Dr. Alfie, who created the Maddie Fund in honor of her mom, who was a grassroots organization helping in her community. And I remember I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Alfie when she came to Newark for a mental wellness conference. And Dr. Alfie was one of the, I think it was 20 individuals throughout the world that Melinda Gates gave $20 million to spread the seed to organizations who are not often seen. And I remember meeting Dr. Alfie because I never understood how they found out about us, but they gifted us with a grant out of nowhere, and it saved us literally. It allowed us to continue to do the work. And I remember meeting her, and I asked her, how did she find out about us? And she said social media.
Yeah.
So that's how powerful social media is, because when you are out there and you're able to share your story, there's going to be someone in the form of an angel like
Someone's
Dr.
listening.
Alfie, who recognized that an organization like Nason's Place was similar to something her mother was doing and helping families in her community, especially around mental wellness. You know, that is so important. And a lot of our autism moms are dealing with mental wellness and making sure that we do it. So social media is very powerful. And, you know, to have someone, you know, reach out to us because they see the work that we do and we share our story is so important. So I'm hoping that more people see our story and know that we are a 501c3 nonprofit, that we are in the trenches, we are making a difference, and your support truly means a lot to us. So social media is so important.
I know that we spoke a lot about being seen, letting the children be seen, the families be seen, and that helps us build an inclusive community. And May, like you said, is Mental Awareness Month, and it's also Mother's Day. So I just want to thank you for being the resilient mom and how you model for others, how you open your heart and your voice and your charge, because you have really been an influence to so many people, including myself. I just want to empower everybody to understand that people are our greatest resources. And social media is a wonderful way to connect with someone when you're not able to connect. To find resources, ADMS has lots of resources and is waiting to help you. So happy Mother's Day to the Resilience Moms. Take time for yourself and know that you are heard and you are in a safe place here. Thank you for joining us for our 4th podcast. We look forward to seeing you again next month. Thank you, Nadine.
Thank you so much for having us, and happy Mother's Day to all of the amazing moms out there.
Thank you.
Until next time, thank you for being here. You're not alone. Until next time, thank you for being here. You're not alone. Until next time, thank you for being here. You're not alone. Within, brought to you by ADMS. We are here to remind you that you're not alone. Here, we talk honestly about real challenges, meaningful growth, a space for connection, encouragement, and resilience. You belong here.